thank you for taking the time to participate in this virtual scoping meeting for the National Nuclear Security Administration's Programmatic Environmental Impact Statement, or NNSA's PEIS, for plutonium pit production. My name is Jacqueline Boltz, and I'll be the moderator for this meeting. My role is to ensure that the meeting runs on schedule, we honor the ground rules, and the maximum number of participants have the opportunity to provide comments. I would like to point out that we have scheduled scoping meetings, 2 of them. One was held yesterday, May 27th, and then today's meeting on May 28th. Both meetings use the same presentation, which has been posted to the NNSA NEPA Reading Room website. As we get started, here are a few tools for the virtual meeting. If you would like to turn on closed captioning, you can select the More tool shown in the toolbar, the 3 dots, which you should see in your toolbar. Then choose Language and Speech and click Turn on Live Captions. There is the option to select language other than English for the captions. You may also adjust your screen layout, and again from this toolbar select View and choose your preferred option. View is the 4 squares, as you can see here. Choices include full screen or focus on content to feature the presentation. If you are joining us by phone, you can find the hearing presentation online at the NNSA NEPA Reading Room, and that web address is www.energy.gov/NNSA/NEPA, that's NEPA, reading, READING, And here's our agenda for the meeting. During this presentation, we will be introducing ourselves, explaining some details related to the scoping meeting, providing an overview of the pit production process and the NEPA process, and providing contact information and specific details about the scoping comment period. The public comment period will follow NNSA's presentation. During this part of the meeting, you will have the opportunity to provide verbal comments on the scope of the PEIS. And next, a few housekeeping items. The first part of the meeting will last approximately 30 minutes. After the presentation, the public will have an opportunity to provide verbal comments on the scope of the PEIS. We expect the meeting to last about 2.5 hours. The comment portion of this meeting will be recorded and transcribed verbatim, so the goal is to maximize the time available for public comment. To ensure everyone who would like to provide a comment has an opportunity to do so, speakers are allotted 3 minutes to provide their comments. If you have written comments, please summarize them verbally, but also submit your written comments by email or postal mail. There will be no exchange of questions and answers during this meeting. If you have questions about the PEIS, please submit them as a scoping comment. Your audio connections are currently muted. To indicate you would like to provide verbal comments, please use the raise hand function, which I will explain how to use later in the presentation. Commenters will be called upon in the order in which you raise your hand. I will go over the ground rules again before the formal comment period. And a scoping comment provides input to NNSA on the scope of the PEIS analysis. It could include input on the range of alternatives to be considered or the specific analysis of impacts in the PEIS. In addition to your verbal comments today, there are 2 other methods you can use to submit comments on the scope of the PEIS. We recommend that you send them by email to PEIS, that's PITPEIS at nnsa.doe.gov. This is the most efficient and reliable method. Or you can send them by postal mail to Ms. Jade Fortner, NEPA Document Manager, Office of Pit Production Modernization, National Nuclear Security Administration, 1000 Independence Avenue, Southwest, in Washington, D.C. 20585. And now I would like to introduce our NNSA panel members. Kristen Doors is the NNSA NEPA Compliance Officer and is in NNSA's Office of Environment, Safety, and Health, or ESH. Ms. Jade Fortner is the NEPA Document Manager for the PEIS and presenter for today's scoping meeting. She works in NNSA's Office of Pit Production Modernization. Mr. Ahmad Aldouk is the Associate Administrator for NNSA's Office of Environment, Safety, and Health. Mr. Aldouk has over 3 decades of federal service and serves as NNSA's Cognizant Secretarial Officer for Safety, as well as a certifying official for off-site shipments of materials of national security interest and other hazardous radioactive materials. He is responsible for the effective development, assessment, and consistent implementation of safety programs and requirements across the nuclear security enterprise. In addition, Mr. Al-Dawouk provides executive leadership and oversight of NNSA's programs, policies, and procedures for packaging and transportation, environment and sustainability, nuclear materials integration, and waste management. Mr. Al-Dawouk has some opening remarks about NNSA's mission and the importance of the PEIS process.
Thank you, Jackie. Hello, my name is Ahmad Al-Dawouk, and I serve as the Associate Administrator for NNSA Office of Environment, Safety, and Health. In my role at NNSA headquarters, we are responsible for an integrated response to congressional mandates, including those related to pit production. I previously served as the Deputy Associate Administrator for the Office of Enterprise Stewardship and helped establish programs to support NNSA's PITS production mission, such as the NNSA Transuranic Waste Program. Our organization, Environment, Safety, and Health, with guidance from our NEPA coordinating officer, Kristen Dors, understands the importance of preparing this PEIS to comply with all regulatory requirements within an aggressive schedule. NNSA needs to respond to a specific requirements in 50 United States Code 2538A, which states, quote, consistent with the requirement of the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Energy shall ensure that the nuclear security enterprise produces not less than 80 war reserve plutonium pits during 2030, end quote. This is not an option. We do not have alternatives to this mandate. This is our mission, and this programmatic EIS will address alternatives to achieve it and will present potential environmental impacts from implementing those alternatives. NEPA encourages the public's participation in federal decision-making to help public officials make better, more informed decisions on projects that have the potential to impact the environment. We welcome your participation and your comments. Thank you for your time. Now I will turn it over this meeting to our presenter and NEPA document manager, Jade Fortner.
Thank you, Ahmad. Hello, and welcome to this scoping meeting for the PIT Production PEIS. My name is Jade Fortner, and I am the NEPA Document Manager for the PIT Production PEIS. I am joined today by Kristen Dors, an NNSA NEPA Compliance Officer. We are both career federal employees and are responsible for the development of the PEIS. Kristen and I will provide guidance during the NEPA process and independently evaluate the NEPA document, as well as coordinate evaluation from other expert federal officials. Thank you for taking your time to attend this meeting. On May 9th of this year, NNSA published a Notice of Intent, or NOI, for the PEIS in the Federal Register. This is the government's formal notification that we are starting the NEPA process for the PEIS and accepting scoping comments. We have also posted the NOI and a copy of this presentation on the NNSA NEPA Reading Room, which can be accessed online. The comment period will end on July 14th. Later in the presentation, I will remind you of the various ways for you to provide comments. This slide provides key milestones related to PIT production and relevant NEPA reviews. There have been multiple programmatic and site-specific NEPA documents prepared that have evaluated PIT production over the years. The 2008 Complex Transformation Supplemental PEIS evaluated the programmatic impacts of PIT production and evaluated the production of 125 to 200 PITs per year at 5 sites across the complex. Federal law was enacted in 2014, 50 U.S. Code 2538A, to establish the requirement to produce 80 PITs per year. This was also addressed in the 2018 Nuclear Posture Review. The 2022 NPR stated that the two-site strategy at Los Alamos National Laboratory, or LANL, and the Savannah River site, or SRS, will eliminate single-point failure and provide flexible capacity options. Site-specific impacts of pit production have been studied extensively at LANL, and its current NEPA document of record is the 2008 Site-Wide EIS, or SWICE. However, in January, LANL published the 2025 draft LANL SWICE for public review. The final SWICE is expected to be published near year's end. A new Record of Decision, or ROD, will follow, and that ROD will describe any decisions at LANL related to pit production. Because all activities at LANL related to pit production are currently in the LANL SWICE No Action Alternative, NNSA does not anticipate any changes to decisions related. They published a final EIS and ROD on pit production at SRS. That decision was the subject of litigation, which brings us here today. This PEIS will evaluate the programmatic impacts of pit production at single and multiple sites. NNSA expects to publish a final PEIS in 2026. A new ROD will follow, and that ROD will describe any decisions related to pit production. NNSA published the final EIS and ROD for the SRS pit production EIS in 2020. Since 2021, NNSA and the Department of Justice have been working with the plaintiffs and the court to resolve a dispute about NEPA coverage. Earlier this year, parties signed a settlement agreement which was subsequently approved by the court. The agreement has specific requirements for the NEPA process that are in addition to those requirements in DOE and NNSA's NEPA implementing procedures 10 CFR Part 1021. These include preparing the PEIS and ROD within 2.5 years of the signed settlement agreement by July of 2027, allowing 45 days of scoping after the last scoping meeting, ending on July 14th, provide for a longer comment period on the draft PEIS of 90 days, and holding a minimum of 5 public hearings in specific locations: Aiken, South Carolina, Kansas City, Missouri, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Livermore, California, and Washington, D.C., as well as any other location that NNSA deems relevant to the PEIS. Additionally, until a ROD is published, NNSA will not introduce or process any nuclear material in the Savannah River Plutonium Processing Facility at SRS, install any classified equipment in the main process building at SRS, or begin field construction of certain waste storage and inspection stations or the waste characterization lab. One of the hallmarks of the NEPA process is to provide for public and government involvement. NEPA includes a legal requirement that federal agencies involve the public when preparing an EIS, and this involvement provides for better decision-making. The scoping process assists NNSA in formulating the proposed action, refining alternatives, and defining the scope of the PEIS analyses. NNSA will consider all comments received to define the scope of the pit production PEIS. The NEPA process for this PEIS involves multiple steps and opportunities for public, stakeholder, government, and tribal involvement. The NOI is only the start. The next major step will be the development of the draft document and making that document available for a comment period. As the schedule shows, NNSA expects to issue a draft PEIS in early 2026. Once that is complete, NNSA will hold at least 5 public hearings to receive comments on the draft PEIS during a 90-day comment period, and will again request that the public, tribes, governments, and other stakeholders provide comments to improve the final PEIS. The Notice of Intent establishes the purpose and need for NNSA's proposed action evaluated in this PEIS. This purpose and need is based on federal law and national policy as identified in the Nuclear Posture Reviews published in 2018 and again in 2022. The national security policies of the United States require a safe, secure, and reliable nuclear weapons stockpile and the maintenance of core competencies to design, manufacture, and maintain nuclear weapons. The 2022 Nuclear Posture Review identified plutonium pit production as one of the highest priorities in the modernization of the nuclear security enterprise over the next 10 years. To meet the need outlined in congressional legislation and requirements delineated by the Department of Defense, DOE and NNSA must establish a workforce and infrastructure capable of producing no fewer than 80 pits per year as soon as possible, while eliminating single-point failures and providing flexible capacity options. Per federal law at 50 U.S. Code 2538A, NNSA is mandated to manufacture no fewer than 80 War Reserve pits per year by 2030. First, a brief summary about pits and pit production. A pit is a hollow sphere of plutonium that, when uniformly compressed by explosives inside of a warhead or bomb, causes a nuclear explosion. Pits are key elements of U.S. nuclear weapons. The laboratory at Los Alamos produced the first plutonium pits in 1945. Since then, LANL has done pit production for research purposes and, from 2007 to 2011, to replace the pits in certain warheads carried on submarine-launched missiles. LANL is currently developing pits for the nuclear stockpile in PF4, but not enough to meet the congressional requirement. NNSA has also begun the process of modifying an existing facility at the Savannah River site in South Carolina to produce pits. This slide presents a simplified overview of the pit production process. The process involves receipt and storage of nuclear and non-nuclear materials and components received from other locations. For instance, some of the non-nuclear components are received from the Kansas City National Security Campus, while most of the plutonium feed material will come from older pits that are currently stored at the Pantex plant in Texas. Most of the other processes, feed preparation, purification, and manufacturing, are all performed in glove boxes in a tightly controlled environment. The end result is a new pit that meets rigorous standards, and these new pits are returned to the Pantex plant for staging. There are radioactive and hazardous waste streams that are generated as a result of the pit production process. Management of these waste streams is a key to the success of the pit production mission. The PEIS will include a discussion of the process that is used to produce plutonium pits and the potential alternative sites that have the necessary infrastructure and could be used for that production. As identified in the NOI, the no-action alternative will be based on NNSA's prior decision to produce 30 pits per year at LANL, with surge efforts to produce up to 80 pits per year. This decision was announced in a record of decision in the Federal Register in September of 2020. It should be noted that the no-action alternative alone may not satisfy NNSA's purpose and need to produce no fewer than 80 pits per year, while eliminating single-point failures and providing flexible capacity options. The PEIS action alternatives will include multi-site production and could vary by production site location, such as SRS and LANL, and by the capacity or production rates that may be considered for each site. NNSA will also consider input from scoping comments before determining the specific range of reasonable alternatives to be presented in the draft PEIS. This slide depicts the 8 major sites of the Nuclear Security Enterprise, or NSE, that support the goal of maintaining a safe, secure, and effective nuclear weapon stockpile. Activities at these sites include research and development, or R&D, production of nuclear and non-nuclear components, and assembly, disassembly, and staging of nuclear weapons. Different sites have different functions. For instance, LANL and SRS are the 2 sites with the existing infrastructure necessary for pit production. Kansas City produces non-nuclear components. Lawrence Livermore National Lab, Sandia National Labs, LANL, and the Nevada National Security Site all perform experimentation, certification, and evaluation activities. Plutonium staging occurs primarily at Pantex, but also at LANL, SRS, and in Nevada. Y-12 in Tennessee manages highly enriched uranium. Per the settlement agreement, NNSA will focus the PEIS on the production of plutonium pits at multiple or single sites. NNSA does not intend to evaluate alternatives related to NSE operations or configurations in this PEIS. Direct results of pit production include the transportation of radiological materials and disposal of waste. The PEIS will specifically evaluate the potential environmental impacts of transporting pits and pit components to and from sites in the NSE, as well as the transportation and disposition of waste that are generated from pit production activities. NNSA will describe, but does not intend to evaluate, R&D and R&D related activities at the national laboratories, including Lanel, Livermore, and Sandia, or Nevada in the PEIS. While these activities are an important element of the overall operations of the NSE, they have no bearing on the need to produce pits to meet national security and legal requirements, or whether pits are produced at multiple or single sites. This slide includes the primary elements of a PEIS, such as a summary and intro section, an overview of the pit production process and the related functions for stockpile management, a description of the pit production siting alternatives, and then chapters that go into detail about the range of affected environments by site and resource area, impact to those environments, as well as regulatory references and detailed technical appendices. These are typical of all NNSA EISs. This slide lists the range of analyses that will be included in the PEIS. The PEIS will analyze environmental resource areas such as land, water, socioeconomics, and ecological and cultural resources, and will also include an evaluation of waste management, human health and safety, transportation, and facility accidents. These are standard for most EISs. For each of the resource areas for each of the affected sites, the PEIS will describe the affected environment and then present the potential environmental impacts associated with each of the reasonable alternatives, including the no action alternative. These are consistent with the resource areas that were evaluated in the Lanel-Swice and the SRS pit production EIS. At the end of the NEPA process, NNSA would prepare a record of decision, or ROD, and consider input from the PEIS, including public comments, and the technical programs, as well as policy and cost considerations. NNSA would not prepare a ROD until at least 30 days after publication of the final PEIS. In addition to your verbal comments today, there are two other methods to provide comments, email or mail, and the moderator Jackie shared them earlier in the presentation. For future reference, NNSA has posted this presentation on the NNSA NEPA Reading Room website. As mentioned previously, the scoping period lasts until July 14th. The next opportunity for public input will follow publication of the draft PEIS expected in early 2026. The notice of availability of the draft PEIS will be announced by the EPA and NNSA in the Federal Register, as well as with a notice to members of the public on the mailing list. The notice of availability will also be published on the NNSA NEPA Reading Room website. Thank you for your attention, and I thank you for being part of this process. We will now begin the formal comment portion of this scoping meeting, and I will hand it back to Jackie.
Thank you, Jade. To indicate you would like to make a comment, please use the raise hand tool on the team screen, which I see several of you have already done. You'll click on the hand icon on the toolbar located on your screen. If you're connected by phone only, dial *5 to raise your hand and lower your hand. When it is your turn to comment, you will receive a notification through the Teams that you should unmute your microphone by dialing *6. We will ask you that you keep your microphones muted until you are called upon, and we'll mute them if we need to. Please state and spell your name and organization, if appropriate, before beginning your comment. To maintain your place on the list, leave your hand raised until you have made your comment. I would ask that everyone please be respectful of others, even if you don't agree with their position or comments. And we will now begin the formal public comment portion of our meeting, which is being recorded. This portion of our meeting is officially designated as a scoping meeting for the Programmatic Environmental Impact Statement for pit production. I'm just going to mute a line. And this meeting is being held online and on the telephone on May 28th, 2025 using Teams. It is being held to receive verbal comments on the scope of the PIT production PEIS. There will be no exchange of questions and answers, and we are commencing this public comment portion of the meeting at 7:25 p.m. Eastern, that's 5:25 p.m. Mountain, and are scheduled to adjourn at 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time or 9:30 Eastern Time. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes in order to maximize the number of people that have the opportunity to provide oral comments. This comment period was preceded by a presentation by NNSA's NEPA document manager, Ms. Jade Fortner. She, along with Ms. Kristen Doors, the NEPA compliance officer for the production PEIS, will represent the NNSA in listening to and accepting your comments. For the record, my name is Jacqueline Bolts, and I've been asked by the NNSA to serve as the moderator for this meeting. As previously mentioned, this meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be used to produce a verbatim transcript of verbal comments received. The transcript of the comments received will be included in the NNSA's record of these proceedings and summarized in the draft PEIS. If you would like to make a comment during this meeting, please use the raise hand feature in the Teams meeting as shown on the screen. For those of you on the phone who wish to make a comment, dial *5 to raise your hand. To maintain your place on the list, leave your hand raised until you have been called upon and made your comment. I'll recognize speakers in order and will try to identify 3 speakers at a time, current speaker and the next 2, so that you'll have some warning before you are to speak. When it's your turn to speak, you will receive a request to unmute your line. Please follow the instructions and then begin speaking. Please remember to state and spell your name and any affiliation if appropriate. If you have a written copy of your comments or a written document you'd like to submit, send it in via email or postal mail using the addresses that have been provided and which we will provide again at the end of the meeting. Each comment will be considered equally by the NNSA. You may submit comments by email or US mail anytime until the close of the comment period on July 14th. There is no limitation on the number or length of comments an individual may submit. If you are having technical difficulties, please visit the Teams support page. Remember the time limit, again 3 minutes per speaker, and focus your comments on the scope of the PEIS. And again, I would ask everyone to please be respectful of others, even if you don't agree with their position or comments. When you have 30 seconds remaining, I'll signal to you to summarize your remaining comments as quickly as possible. So let's get started. Our first speaker will be Greg Mello, and Greg will be followed by Jim Whitlock and then Anushka. So Greg Mello, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Greg Mello, G-R-E-G-M-E-L-L-O. I'm the Executive Director of the Los Alamos Study Group. Thank you for this opportunity. Our most important comments are going to be after this in bulletins. Go to our homepage at lasg.org to subscribe or call us at 505-265-1200. First comments are regarding the no action alternative. It should be changed. The present no action alternative is an integral part of the very same NNSA decision of September 2nd, 2020, which is itself the major federal action being reviewed in this PEIS. NNSA has no prior independent decision supporting its proposed no action alternative. The NNSA has stated that achieving the alleged no action alternative will take until the end of 2032. In its congressional budget request, the remaining forward cost of this effort is in excess of $10 billion. We estimated at $12 billion. So this cannot be a true status quo no action alternative. We note that NNSA has testified to Congress it will not under any circumstances meet any of the statutory pit production obligations that the agency bases this PEIS upon. It's operating independent of and in violation of statutory requirements right now. Did not produce 10 well reserve pits last year. It produced 1, not on track to produce 20 this year or 30 next year. NNSA recently testified that it expects to have installed the capability to produce 30 pits by 2028. Egregious violations of statutory requirements like this are a signal that something is wrong with NNSA's plans and commitments or else with the statutes. statutes can be unreasonable. The NNSA, the NAA, the no action alternative, need not be reasonable in the agency's eyes or even lawful. The need for federal action under NEPA arises precisely because the status quo is unreasonable in agency eyes. Summing up, a true NNSA, no action alternative must involve no preparations for pit production at any site. Keeping technology demonstration and training at LANL with de minimis pit production as was in place from September 1996 to September 2020 under several NEPA records of decision. Action alternatives need to be described with a closed interval, not an open-ended interval like greater than 30 or whatever, and must include the fact that the NNSA does not expect to use LANL's 50-year-old PF4 indefinitely, as has been expressed in reports to Congress. So the only alternatives which are remotely reasonable are those which involve terminating LANL production either permanently by some date or else transition to new facilities which need to be in this PEIS. Thank you. I think my time is up. I appreciate your patience.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Jim Whitlock, followed by Anushka, and then Angie Cox. Jim Whitlock, if you'd like to unmute your microphone. And to unmute your microphone, you can click on the microphone icon, which is in the top right of your screen, or if you click on the people icon, you should see your name. Oh, there you go.
There. Okay, good.
Okay.
Hello, my name is James Whitlock, JamesWhitlock. I'm a physician and member of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War and the Greater Boston Physicians for Social Responsibility. The U.S. has based its national security on nuclear deterrence. This means that should any nation sufficiently threaten us, we will annihilate them, even if to do so requires our own suicide, the destruction of innocent bystander countries, and even the end of most life on Earth. To me, collecting opinions regarding environmental concerns related to plutonium pit creation is a little like gathering thoughts on whether it would be better to build an Amazon-sized anthrax plant in an area with prevailing westerly versus easterly winds. The legacy of plutonium pit production is Rocky Flats, Los Alamos, and Hanford, each an environmental disaster area. Profound contamination with heavy metals and other isotopes remain at other nuclear weapon sites, Savannah River, Oak Ridge, Lawrence Livermore. Plutonium use during atmospheric and underground testing has rendered some surface areas within the Nevada test site essentially permanently toxic. Aquifer contamination beneath the Nevada test site is being monitored as it slowly moves southwest. Over $73 billion have been spent in attempts to mitigate the environmental damage at all of these sites. Even with this, results have been disappointing. Discussing a proposal related to new plutonium pit production is at odds with our participation in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Adding to our 49-ton national stockpile of plutonium and transporting new pits around the country will increase risk of loss or capture of weapons-grade product. It will also encourage other countries to embrace or enhance nuclear weapon capacity. As bound by the NPT, we are supposed to be committed to making progress toward nuclear disarmament. Expanding or replacing our nuclear weapons is completely at odds with this. There is only one rational approach to addressing the risks that plutonium pit projects entail, and that's to abandon them. We should be putting much greater effort into research regarding safe and effective reprocessing of plutonium into a state that minimizes its risk to life on Earth. That's it.
Thank you for your comment. And our next speaker is Anushka, followed by Angie Cox, and then Robert Gould.
Hello, my name is Anushka, and I am the Environmental Program Manager at Tri-Valley Cares.
Could you spell your name, please? Sorry.
Yes, Anushka. I'm here today because I'm deeply concerned about the human cost of expanded plutonium pit production especially how it impacts communities that already bear the brunt of nuclear activities and contamination. The proposed PEIS must clearly disclose how many shipments of plutonium and radioactive waste will occur, how frequently they'll happen, and exactly which roads will carry this hazardous material. We already know this includes busy routes like Highway 80, passing directly through San Francisco Bay Area, across northern Nevada, and presume that it would expose millions of people to potential risk. People along these routes, especially lower income farming towns, native communities, and even reservations, are already dealing with legacy contamination and inadequate cleanup. Yet, even as shipments of hazardous materials increase, cleanup budgets are being cut. This is unacceptable. Communities that have lived for decades with contaminated water, air, and land deserve increased support instead of reduced funding. Every truck carrying plutonium or radioactive waste through neighborhoods and across tribal lands increases the risk of contamination. Many of these communities lack resources for emergency response and healthcare services, and a single accident could devastate their environment, health, and the local economy for generations. The PEIS should address how these funding cuts will impact ongoing cleanup efforts. It must also assess the compounded risks of adding thousands of shipments on routes already strained by traffic and limited infrastructure. Before committing billions of dollars to expand PIP production, we need a clear picture of how the government plans to protect these communities and not further harm them. Uh, we're asking for transparency, accountability, and an increased cleanup funding instead of simply expanding plutonium pit production. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next will be Angie Cox, followed by Robert Gould, and then Syra Namaste. Angie Cox, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Angie Cox, ANGIECOX, President and CEO of the Augusta Metro Chamber of Commerce. The Augusta Metro Chamber of Commerce supports economic growth and quality of life for the residents of the greater Metro Augusta region. Since the beginning of the Department of Energy's Savannah River site over 70 years ago, it has been a major factor in growing our region. This continues today, and the Augusta Metro Chamber of Commerce, or AMCC, is keenly interested on behalf of its business members across 2 states in the future growth of activity at the site. In June 2019, AMCC supported NNSA's exploration of future pit production at the Savannah River site by converting the mixed oxide fuel fabrication facility to a new use. We ask that NNSA continue this path towards activating Savannah River site's capability in supporting pit production and the critical expansion and modernization goals needed to ensure our nation's nuclear security. There is no doubt that Savannah River site can execute this new mission given the talent, expertise, and operational experience it has demonstrated for 75 years. Its track record in executing its tritium mission, as well as decades of the safe handling, processing, and disposal of nuclear materials, places SRS at the pinnacle of NNSA's assets and ready to do its job. As a regional advocate, AMCC stands ready as a leader in the business community in continuing to support the establishment of a superior workforce and the community infrastructure needed to ensure the success of this new mission. Our organization, along with many others in the region, are dedicated to programs that will continue to expand the workforce pipeline and work with local and state political leadership in maximizing community assets such as housing and quality of life that ensure our region is a magnet for workforce and academic pursuits in the nuclear industry. In conclusion, we believe that the production of plutonium pits at the congressionally mandated rate, utilizing multi-site alternatives such as SRS, is in the best interest of our region and our country. we strongly encourage NNSA's favorable evaluation of the impacts and capabilities of SRS in support of its stockpile stewardship and management program. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next will be Robert Gould, followed by Syra Namaste, and then Spencer Graves. Robert Gould, please go ahead. Robert Gould, I can see your microphone's open if you'd like to make your comment. For some reason we aren't hearing you, Robert Gould. If you could click on the arrow next to the microphone and check your audio options, make sure that you have your microphone connected. And while you do that, I'm going to move on to the next speaker, Syra Namaste, to unmute yourself and make your comment, and then Robert Gould will come back to you in just a moment. Syra Namaste, if you'd like to unmute yourself, the microphone icon is at the top of the screen if you're on the web browser. Syra Namaste, are you available? We'll move on then to Spencer Graves, and after Spencer Graves, we'll go back to Robert Gould and see if Robert Gould's been able to connect their microphone, and then Ben Cunningham would be the next speaker. So Spencer Graves, please go ahead.
I'm Spencer Graves, SPENCERGRAVES with PeaceWorks Kansas City. I'm a Vietnam-era veteran with a PhD in statistics. My publications include articles on forecasting nuclear proliferation and responding to a nuclear attack. ResearchGate has found over 1,200 academic publications that have cited my work. We live in a dangerous world, made more dangerous by actions of U.S. government officials. Documentation.
We're having a little difficulty hearing you, Mr. Graves. If you can speak into your microphone, please.
Yes. Let me. So should I start over?
If you just go back a sentence or two, I think we heard
okay. We live in a dangerous world made more dangerous by actions of U.S. government officials. Documentation of what are called system accidents has established that it is impossible to manage a complex system subject to rare but catastrophic failures to ultra-high levels of reliability, because managers learn from experience that they can safely take increasing risks until a catastrophe proves them wrong. During the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, there were 4 nuclear weapon states. When then President George W.
calling my name, and I'm like, I can't unmute.
May I continue?
Yes, go ahead.
When then President George W. Bush declared an axis of evil consisting of Iran, Iraq, and North Korea, there were 8. Now there are 9. Thank you, President Bush. Leaders of the U.S., Russia, and other nuclear weapons states will continue taking ever more provocative risks until nuclear Armageddon. After the Cuban Missile Crisis, President Kennedy said he thought the odds for war were somewhere between 1 and 3 and even. From that, I estimate a probability of less than 1% of a nuclear war in the next year, but a probability exceeding 90% of such a war in the next 75 years. Recent simulations of nuclear wars by leading experts note that cities would almost certainly be targeted and would generate firestorms, lofting smoke to the stratosphere, depressing surface temperatures for years. A nuclear war between the U.S. and Russia would likely kill 99% of the populations of the U.S., Europe, Russia, and China, and 3/4 of humanity. The worst response to a nuclear attack would be nuclear, because it would elevate the death toll from millions to billions.
30 seconds, please.
Deterrence expert LeBeau insists that that deterrent strategies have been as likely to provoke as prevent a war. Former U.S. Secretaries of State Kissinger and Schultz, Secretary of Defense Perry, Senator Nunn, said that we must eliminate our nuclear weapons, otherwise nuclear Armageddon is almost certain. For more, see pwkc.org/NO.
Thank you for your comment. Robert Gould, if you'd like to try again. If for some reason we're not able to hear you, if you do click on the 3 dots icon in that menu, you can see Call Me and can have Teams call you to set up your connection through your telephone. We'll go back to Syra Namaste. I think I heard you unmute your microphone.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I kept trying when you were calling my name.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead. And then just after you will
Okay.
be Ben Cunningham and Pamela Greenlaw. But please go ahead and please state and spell your name.
Right. My name is Sayra Namaste, Sayrahnaste. I'm calling in today to oppose further plutonium pit production because I'm very concerned about the impact on people's health and the health of the environment. And I'm concerned about the radioactive material and the risk of cancer. Last week, I lost a friend to cancer. She was diagnosed in January. She died in May. Very fast, 52 years old, born in Los Alamos, and spending her whole life here. And I know a lot of people have been affected by cancer, and that is my big concern. In 2022, the little girl next door tried to stand up and fell down. She had been complaining of pain for a long time, and they realized that she had bone cancer and had eaten through her hip bone. A few months later, my daughter got diagnosed with cancer. And both of our daughters, these 2 girls who lived next door to each other, battled cancer for a year. In the fall, the girl next door died of cancer. My daughter is still battling cancer in 2025. I don't want anyone to be exposed to radioactive materials, to carcinogenic materials that could risk their health. No mother should have to go through what my neighbor went through in burying her daughter and what I'm going through at my daughter's bedside. This is very dangerous material. We do not need more nuclear weapons. We have plenty, and we shouldn't have any, in my opinion. I do not want more plutonium pit production. I don't want more people exposed to things that could cause someone they love to get cancer. I want you to rethink all of it, similar to what Greg Mello was saying at the very beginning, this idea of taking action on plutonium pit production. So thank you for listening to the community. We do not want to be exposed to cancer.
Thank you for your comment. And we will, try one more time with Robert Gould. Are you able to get your microphone activated? It is open, but we're not able to hear you. Again, if you can either click on the arrow next to the mic option or mic icon to set up your microphone, or click on more and ask the team system to call you so your audio connection will switch to your phone. And we will move on. Ben Cunningham will be next, followed by Pamela Greenlaw, and then Robbie Bennett. Ben Cunningham, please go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Ben Cunningham, BenCunningham. I'm an attorney with the South Carolina Environmental Law Project. The PEIS alternatives analysis should include a thorough examination for single-site pit production alternatives. The purpose and need portion of the NOI that mentions eliminating single-point failures and providing flexible capacity options should not be construed to limit alternatives only to dual-site alternatives. The reconstitution of extant pit materials currently in storage at the Pantex plant satisfies the statutory requirements for pit production contained in 50 U.S.C. Section 2538A. Pit reconstitution should be explored and considered as a reasonable alternative to satisfy the statutory, quote, produces requirement for pit production. It is not manufactures, as was previously represented today. The alternatives analysis should include a focus about the import of the latest State of New Mexico HWA RCRA permit for the waste isolation pilot plant and its constraints regarding waste disposition, including priority given to in-state legacy waste and landfill cleanup waste. These are sections 4.2.1.4 and 4.2.1.5 of that permit. These restrictions will affect pit production and waste disposition. The NOI also appears to have made a determination that certain alternatives are necessarily reasonable, and the implication is that they are pit production at landfill and SRS. This kind of predetermination with respect to scoping and ultimately a PEIS is improper and illegal under NEPA and various case law interpreting same, including Metcalf versus Daly, 214 F. 3rd, 1135, 1142. There should be a thorough analysis of all reasonable alternatives, not a justification for decisions already made. To wit, the agency should not use any work done now or previously at SRS to support the pit production alternative at SRS. Also, given the lagging pace of pit production currently, we suggest examining impacts for 60 years instead of the proposed 50 years. With respect to the environmental analysis items, they should be expanded and more clearly defined and should include an evaluation of potential impacts on the public and workers from radiological and hazardous waste exposures from anticipated or potential short, medium, and long-term storage of both types of waste on site or at some other offsite facility that does not contemplate permanent emplacement or disposition. Also, an analysis of potential risk to workers, the public, and the environment associated with these storage scenarios. The analysis
wrap up your comments, please.
The analysis should also evaluate potential consequences to the workers and the public due to take-home exposures and the public in general from migration of pollutants and materials through surface, groundwater, and other vectors, and should also evaluate potential impacts to the public and the environment due to the increased likelihood of nuclear weapon deployment and use resulting from the vast increase in pit production and the expansion of the nuclear arsenal, as well as the changing geopolitical climate and global warming and climate change. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next will be Pamela Greenlaw, followed by Robbie Bennett, and then Leah Yannington.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, my name is Pamela Greenlaw, P-A-M-E-L-A-G-R-E-E-N-L-A-W. I am a concerned citizen, and I want to say that the PEIS scoping is actually an impossible task if you do it thoroughly and completely. I believe sincerely that being told that you're on an aggressive schedule, and it is because you're not giving sufficient time for people to express what needs to go into the scoping. We have until July 14th to get written comments in. That is insufficient time for lay people and even experts to collect ideas that must go into the PEIS. And I'm going to look at my notes, if you'll give me just a second here. I believe that although it's required by a court ruling, that you actually failed to look at and adhere to the guidelines, considering the cumulative impacts. I don't know how you can predict cumulative impacts for plutonium pits that have not yet been produced. If you have 80 per year that are made, and that, of course, that's unreasonable, it won't happen, but your PEIS is supposed to take account for that. You don't have the data. You can't make predictions without sufficient data. The waste isolation pilot plant will not be able to accept the plutonium pit waste that will be generated. The Savannah River site is in a wetland area. The river flows to the ocean. It will affect all communities from there unto, to the coast, going through the Gullah Geechee culture. And I think you already have that in the, you're familiar with this already. Not only, okay, the transportation is going to be a serious issue. We don't have sufficient numbers of workers, of experts to monitor and to assess every place that the trucks will be carrying materials, nuclear materials, to and fro across the United States.
30 seconds, please.
Okay, thank you. So you must include the conditions in the PEIS, conditions of the roads, bridges, train tracks, etc., for every leg of the proposed and actual transportation routes and alternate routes. You must assess those for both LANL and SRS. There's a lot of crisscrossing of states in this preparation, and the acquisition of materials, production, and waste management are necessarily more complex in regard to Savannah River site, since they have not produced pits in many years. As far as environment
Wrap up your
goes,
comments, please.
yes, you must consider preparations. You have, there will be freak accidents. There will be weather conditions that you cannot predict, but you still must.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up. If you'd like to submit your comments by writing or
Yes,
email, I'll
yes,
provide that information.
and we also have cybersecurity problems and physical security, possible theft of materials. This also must go into the PEIS. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your comment. And our next speaker will be Robbie Bennett, followed by Leah Yannington, and then Jay Coughlin. Robbie Bennett, if you'd like to unmute yourself and state and spell your name.
Thank you very much. My name is Robbie Bennett, ROBBIEBENNETT, and I represent the Savannah Riverside Community Reuse Organization. Our organization is a U.S. Department of Energy designated community reuse organization for the Savannah River site and is currently governed by 22 board members representing business, government, and academic leaders from Georgia and South Carolina. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization charged with developing and implementing a comprehensive strategy to diversify the economy of the designated 5-county region. Our region includes Aiken County, Allendale, Barnwell counties in South Carolina, and Richmond County and Columbia counties in Georgia. The SRS CRO is focused on new missions at SRS and ensuring the site maintains its role as a part of the nation's national security structure. This mission continues that legacy. For 75 years, the Savannah River site has been a cornerstone of our region, not just as a major employer, but as a partner in safety, service, and progress. From Aiken to Augusta, our rural communities, and beyond, we have seen firsthand how the people employed at SRS have quietly and consistently helped keep this country safe. SRS has carried out many missions over its 75 years, including the tritium mission. They've managed nuclear materials with precision and care, and they've done it while taking careful watch over our environment, supporting our schools, and showing up in our neighborhoods and communities. We do not see this project simply as a national security necessity. We see it as an opportunity to continue on a legacy of excellence, an opportunity to bring new jobs, new skills, and new investment into our communities. In 2024, SRS purchased over $438 million in goods and services from local businesses in the 2-state region. That is important for the vitality of this region. This mission comes with additional growth with construction jobs, the permanent jobs coming in after that. And this means more families, more opportunities to foster the economic diversification in this region. Our board, our communities are proud of Savannah Riverside. We have always been, and we will continue to be proud to support the site and the next steps of this process. This is a mission that will not only protect our country, but also strengthen the communities that have stood behind SRS for generations. We want to see this continue. We look forward to supporting this. And when it comes to workforce, our organization has been leading that charge as well, helping to create a nuclear workforce ready to meet the demands and needs of the Savannah River site. And we will continue that effort going forward. I appreciate the time and thank you for all the comments today.
Thank you for your comment. Next will be Leah Yannington and Jay Coughlin, and then I do see that Robert Gould has joined, so we'll come back to you and see if you're able to unmute your microphone after these next two speakers. So Leah Yannington, please go ahead and state and spell your name. Yes, go ahead.
It's Leahyananton. Thank you. The PEIS alternative analysis must include a long-term plan for cleanup and health. Nuclear waste, nuclear accidents, contamination by plutonium and radioactive materials, those are accidents that are not revocable. And you have the expertise, you have the intelligence, the genius with nuclear engineering. You should invest in technologies to clean up the mess that your agency has made since 1945 or earlier. And this is not bringing vitality to communities and economies by continuing business as usual and contamination as usual. So if you want vitality in your communities, and if you care about the security of America, you want to actually create a healthy environment, not a lethal environment that threatens extinction and annihilation of the entire human species, which is what this principle of deterrence is based on. Mutually assured destruction is a very threatening and terrorizing strategy, and it is outdated. We can retire this. So the PEIS alternative analysis must include consideration for stopping past practices and bringing critical thought and diplomacy to the table, right? Diplomacy comes from talking about complex issues, not just threatening to blow up each other into complete annihilation. America is a beautiful country, right? We should protect our natural resources, protect our water, protect our children. And the effects of plutonium and the radioactive materials that you seek to use at Los Alamos and Savannah River site, these things are contaminants and does not bring security to the land. You should look at the delayed effects of your nuclear tests on climate destabilization, on global warming, and you should have a moral category in your PEIS for your justification for extincting life on Earth.
30 seconds, please.
The pit production at Savannah River site is increasingly over budget and further delayed. As a result, will pit production be increased at Los Alamos National Lab? And how will this impact the lab's poor nuclear safety record? NNSA has no credible cost estimates for expanded plutonium pit production. Why? The Trump administration is suppressing environmental justice and climate change issues. And we demand full discussion of these issues as they relate to pit production in this PEIS. President Roosevelt has said,
wrap up your comments, please.
Yes, that war is brutal, inhumane, and thoroughly impractical. He was talking about atomic warfare, impractical method of settling the differences between governments. Please invest in the future of America and have an actual no action alternative. That means no new nuclear material. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next will be Jay Coughlin, followed by Robert Gould, and then Deborah M. Jay Coughlin?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, here goes. First of all, Jay Coughlin, that's Jay, and then Coughlin, Coghlan, and I'm with Nuclear Watch New Mexico. We were one of the co-plaintiffs that forced this programmatic environmental impact statement. So I'll start with 6 weeks ago here in northern New Mexico, we were dealing with the Los Alamos site-wide EIS. And of course, there's going to be a lot of parallels, and I expect basically major components of that site-wide EIS to also be present in this programmatic PEIS. But first item is I'm pointing to is that the sequence is entirely backwards. First, there should have been a programmatic environmental impact statement and then a site-wide. And I suggest as a matter of scope, NNSA should explain its position. Now, in the Los Alamos site-wide EIS, the one-word rationale for everything is deterrence. And as another scoping item, I think there should be comprehensive discussion of deterrence in the programmatic EIS. We always hear deterrence, but the public is generally not aware that the Pentagon always explicitly rejects minimal deterrence in favor of counterforce. That's jargon, but basically that's keeping nuclear warfighting capabilities, which is why we have thousands of weapons instead of just a few hundred, and that's why we're having expanded pit production. So as another scoping topic, I think there should be a full discussion of deterrence, so-called deterrence, discussion of nuclear warfighting capabilities and the consequences. I also think there should be full disclosure by NNSA in the PEIS that none of this pit production, that is to say zero, none of it is to maintain the safety and reliability of the existing stockpile. Instead, it's all for new nuclear weapons designs for the new nuclear arms race. And as a corollary to that, that could possibly prompt the U.S. Into testing. So there should be a discussion of that. Now, closing with my final topic, the site-wide for Los Alamos makes the claim that NNSA's weapons programs are, and I'm quoting here, fully consistent with and supports the U.S.'s commitment to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. That is demonstrably false. That should be retracted. And it gets to the core rationale of why NNSA is proceeding. NNSA, of course, likes to cite the statutory requirement for producing 80 pits per year. But superseding that, in my view, is Article 6 of the Constitution, which explicitly declares that international treaties are the supreme law of the land.
You can wrap up your comments, please.
In my amateur opinion, the statutory requirement for 80 pits per year should be subordinated to fully honoring the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So that too should be fully explored in the programmatic environmental impact statement. And with that, I'm done for now.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments. And let's see, our next commenter, we'll see if Robert Gould is able to unmute his microphone, and then Deborah M., followed by Marilia Kelly. Robert Gould, if you'd like to unmute your microphone. You do have to click on the icon. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I just had such a disconnect that they're on site. My name is Dr. Robert Gould, that's spelled G-O-U-L-D. I worked as a pathologist for over 30 years before becoming an adjunct assistant professor at the UCSF School of Medicine in 2012, working as a collaborator with our program on reproductive health and the environment. I'm speaking today as the North American Regional Vice President of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, which won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1985, as well as in my capacity as President of San Francisco Bay Physicians for Social Responsibility, representing hundreds of health professionals who, guided by the expertise of medicine and public health, work to protect human life from the gravest threats to health and survival, including the dangers of nuclear weapons and war. We think that the PEIS should analyze the full range of the potential public health harms of transporting, working with storing, handling, and disposing of increased levels of plutonium at all facilities involved over the relevant half-life of the plutonium isotopes in use. This includes the health hazards and risks of plutonium across all the geographical locations that are intended to work with this. We also believe that NNSA should address the health hazards and risks of plutonium could directly and indirectly expose workers, including the potential health impacts to workers involved in enhanced plutonium utilization, as well as the potential for exposure to unprotected nearby employees in case of an accident, release, spill, or intentional or destructive act. The PEIS should also address the health hazards and risks of increased quantities of plutonium storage and waste. Any accident scenario analysis performed should account for the increase of radioactive waste and should include an analysis of the environmental impacts at the interim and permanent off-site waste receivers, including an analysis of whether the waste isolation pilot plant in Mexico can handle the increase in programmatic radioactive waste from Los Alamos or other sites. We need to know how you are all planning for the risk of environmental releases of plutonium, whether through unintentional releases, criticalities, fires expected to increase from global warming, spills, intentionally destructive acts, or other scenarios. You know that plutonium is a radioactive material, and it's an assessment for the potential of public health harms associated with increased utilization of plutonium. We need to know NNSA's assumptions as to the relationship between exposure to ionizing radiation and health outcomes. We also need to understand better the purpose of increased utilization of plutonium at Department of Energy facilities. What purpose will the increased plutonium be utilized? What experiments or other activities is needed for? Please consider in particular that the historic Jason studies found that plutonium pits can last 85 to 100 years, while the pits in our stockpile are at the most 50 years old. So we need to really explore that, any need to have this very dangerous activities taking place. We also need to understand and incorporate alternatives to this increase. Please delineate the full range of alternatives to increasing plutonium utilization. The U.S. has spent trillions of dollars since the beginning of the nuclear age preparing to fight a nuclear war, while at the same time there's been an accumulation of irrefutable evidence that the use of atomic weapons, even in a limited war, would be catastrophic for human survival. Please address the full range
wrap up
of
your
alternatives,
comments,
including current global disarmament efforts such as the UN Treaty to prohibit nuclear weapons that could potentially counter any perceived need to continue or expand DOE plutonium activities. I'll close with this. We should recognize that currently the U.S. government is dismantling the regulatory apparatus and framework that has historically supported the presumption of oversight across the agencies tasked with ensuring safe transport, storage, handling, and waste disposal of plutonium, including but not limited to the NNSA itself. In light of these transformative changes heralding diminished capacity within the federal government, we need to understand how NNSA and DOE's capacity
please wrap up.
capacity to carry out increased plutonium utilization, including protecting community and environmental health from contamination. I will conclude adding that the estimated $1.7 trillion slated for nuclear modernization over the next 3 decades, or $4 to $6 million per hour, is intolerable given the crying public and environmental health needs of the American people, whose safety net has been severely shredded by our current administration. It's time to provide
Dr. Gould, I'll have to
real
ask you to submit the
people,
rest of your comments
not
in
an
writing,
expedited
please.
glide path to planetary annihilation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. And as a reminder for those joining by phone, if you would like to make a comment, you can dial *5 to raise your hand, and you'll be recognized when your turn is up. Next, we'll go to Deborah M., followed by Marilia Kelly. Then we have a phone caller with area code 617, and the phone number ending in 1517 will be our third commenter. Deborah M., please go ahead and state and spell your name.
My name is Deborah Matherly, DEBORAH, MATHERLY. I live in Lexington County, South Carolina, just 45 miles away from the Savannah River site. I've led over a dozen published national reports on transportation emergency management, evacuation, and resilience, so I know something about risk. I'm also an active member of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Columbia, South Carolina, a concerned citizen, and a great-grandmother. I'm speaking for myself. I'm very concerned that these proposed new pits would increase the nuclear waste and potential for hazardous releases nearby, in addition to the long-term storage and disposal risks and hazards. This is even more distressing because this new plutonium pit production is unnecessary, as noted by several previous speakers. The anticipated costs and cost overruns for this unnecessary proposal could further jeopardize the future economy of our country, starving even more necessary programs on top of already dangerous levels of deficits. These combined harms threaten the future for our children and grandchildren. As we consider the choices that will resonate for decades or centuries, let us remember that we do not inherit the earth from our fathers, we borrow it from our children. In that light, I offer 3 specific recommendations. First, the NNSA and DOE should definitely consider an option where no new pits are produced, instead focusing efforts and budget on the safe stewardship of the current stockpile, as noted by several previous speakers as well. Second, the NNSA and DOE must place a higher priority on the safety and well-being of workers at frontline communities, remediating existing harm, including groundwater and soil pollution, and transparently documenting the cumulative risks associated with pit production, storage, and transportation. Third, in addition to the PEIS, the NNSA and DOE should produce integrated cost and schedule projections for the entire project according to GAO recommendations, being transparent and accountable for the full life cycle scope, clearly identifying underlying assumptions and forecast risks. So thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you for your comment. Next will be Marilia Kelly, and then phone caller from phone area code 617, ending in 1517, and then Karen Haddon.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm Mary Leah Kelly, Senior Advisor at Tri-Valley Cares. My name is spelled M-A-R-Y-L-I-A, last name K-E-L-L-E-Y. Tri-Valley Cares maintains offices in Livermore and Tracy, California, and is one of the plaintiff organizations in the litigation that forced this programmatic environmental impact statement. Tri-Valley Cares will provide detailed comments in writing. Given a scarce 3-minute time limit this evening, I'll focus on one point. The PEIS must include serious and detailed information and analysis of Livermore Lab's role in NNSA's expanded pit production program. This information and analysis of Livermore Lab's role has been conspicuously absent in all of the fragmented NEPA documents done to date.
For example, we know from Los Alamos Lab's NEPA documents for enhanced plutonium pit production that Los Alamos plans to ship plutonium to Livermore Lab, and that plutonium will then be shipped from Livermore back to Los Alamos in service of enhanced plutonium pit production. It's approximately 1,100 miles each way. The PEIS must disclose and discuss the types, forms, and amounts of plutonium involved in this activity. For example, will these shipments include plutonium samples, and of what size, pit hemishells, and/or full plutonium pits? How many shipments are planned? Will the plutonium travel by roads, which I believe is correct? Which roads? The common route used from Los Alamos to Livermore has traveled through California, south to north, coming into Livermore on I-580. However, a newer map suggests the plutonium from Lanol may go all the way up to northern Nevada and then down into California via Highway 80. Each of those routes has unique hazards. Our ability to comment on alternatives will be unnecessarily and severely constrained if full information on all of the points I mentioned and others that are related, if NNSA offers only generalities in its upcoming draft PEIS. I also want to associate myself with a number of comments made tonight, in particular Anushka's and Ben Cunningham's comments. And I also support members of the public, including one who spoke here tonight, who want an increase in the public comment period. I also want to suggest that the basis for this PEIS, when it's given as the public law that's in the annual defense, the annual I'm sorry.
Wrap up your comments, please.
Okay. I'll say it this way because I realized I was at the end, and the way I was going to say it was going to be very detailed and become very long. In short, that authorization is done annually. That authorization can be changed. As has been pointed out, Lanol and Savannah River and NNSA are not going to be in compliance with its requirements as is, so it should be redone in the coming year, and therefore what should be in that authorization is appropriate for discussion in the PEIS itself, because it is not carved in stone. It can and should change. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is a phone caller from area code 617. The phone number ends in 1517. You can dial *6 to mute your microphone, and you'll be followed by Karen Haddon and Kenneth.
Hi, my name is Susan Entin, SUSANENTIN. I am an associate member of International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War and a member of the Boston hub of the Back from the Brink campaign. I'm alarmed at the continued insistence that possessing nuclear weapons deters war and nuclear war. With Putin threatening the use of nuclear weapons or bombing nuclear power plants that would leak radioactive waste all over the place, it cannot be as far away from a possibility by accident or on purpose. I am even more alarmed that the scientific community, or some of it, has responded to people who want to return to the arms racing, are saying that we have to postpone decommissioning nuclear power plants or outright sabotage the clean energy movement by saying that we won't continue to fight nuclear power. The disposal of the waste and the wastewater is not being made rapidly because they're stalling to open new power plants, which would create more mining of uranium on native land in Arizona, New Mexico, or South Dakota. Not only that, but scientists who know that uranium and nuclear waste will remain radioactive and murderous to all organic life for a half-life of 1,500 years. We'll talk about sparing U.S. mining and processing new plutonium pits by reusing the ones that were dismantled from international treaty negotiation. This is a trigger for a fission bomb that triggers the fusion hydrogen bomb that makes up most of our arsenal. We need to negotiate an end to all nuclear weapons with all nuclear states involved and negotiate in good faith. And since the nuclear war is not likely to have survivors anywhere on the planet, if many of the responding or first striking superpowers go off the end. But as we continue to hold these weapons and to ask to build more of them, we set an example to other countries that say, well, we ought to have nuclear weapons so we can be taken seriously. This is
30 seconds, please.
This is outrageous. And the man who pulled us out of the Iran nuclear treaty negotiated by John Kerry is now claiming he wants to negotiate with Iran. As long as we refuse to insist upon and act upon mutual nuclear disarmament, the more nuclear is likely to be used. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker will be Karen Haddon, followed by Kenneth, and then Kevin Camps.
Hi, my name is Karen Haddon, Karen Hadden. And I'd like to, and I'm here on behalf of Texas Nuclear Watchdogs. I have been a board member of PSR in Texas. And I appreciate and agree with the comments of Greg Mello, James Whitlock, Anushka, Spencer Graves in particular, Simon Aste, Ben Cunningham, Pamela Greenlaw, Leah Hannington, Jay Coughlin, and Dr. Robert Gould, Deborah Matherly, Mary Lee Kelly, Susan Enton. And I hope that you will incorporate into the sections of this document and socioeconomics and human health and safety, environmental and geology and soils the following comments. Nuclear weapons cannot and do not make the world a safer place. We should be focusing on disarmament instead of building weapons. The number should not be 30 or 80 nuclear weapons a year. It should be 0. And we should be taking apart what we have in our existing stockpile. That would make the world a safer place. The last GAO study I saw had $540 billion to clean up that was needed for DOE sites, legacy sites, including Los Alamos, Savannah River site, and others. And a lot of that waste eventually ends up in Texas, my home state, at the DOE facility out there. And basically, we need to stop making this stuff. We need to make the world safer by reducing our weapons and pursuing international non-proliferation treaties. I had the fortune to get to know a Hibakusha man from Japan. He had lived through the Hiroshima bombing as a young boy. He spent the day after the bomb went off, first in shock and then wandering the streets of a totally obliterated city that he once knew and loved. There were no more roads. There were no more people walking. People were lying on the ground calling out for water, and he could do nothing to help them. And he just wandered in ultimate desolation for that whole entire day. And the rest of his life he spent to hoping and preventing a future nuclear war. We don't need to be building more weapons. We need to be pursuing a peaceful world. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker will be Kenneth, followed by Kevin Camps, and then Donna Caban.
Hello, this is Kenneth Buchanan. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'm a former engineer, master's level, and nuclear reactor operator in the Navy. And the idea that we have 14,000 of these pits in storage and we need to make more just seems ludicrous. Pit production at SRS is increasingly over budget and impact the lab's poor nuclear safety record. As an experienced engineer, you know, I've worked with systems and all this. It seems to me that looking at the data and everything that is going on is that the weapons people are out of control. Also, I know people who machined plutonium in Amarillo, Texas. They're dead. My sister lived near the plant. She's dead of cancer at the age of 50. I don't think there's near enough studies going on of what the pollution is that's being released from these facilities, you know, what the death rate is and what the cause is. I see no published reports associated with this. So, you know, just being able to say that you only had half the amount that would cause the 50% of the people to die at the end of this time is not a great thing. And, you know, 14,000 we have in storage, and with another 50 years of use in those. Plus, we could recycle the ones that we have. And, you know, with the budget overruns and everything else, it seems like we should be able to do something else. The Trump administration is suppressing environmental protection and running against every law, restriction, and rule that we can come up against. If we do not follow even the small rules and regulations that we have now, how can we hope to run safety programs or come out of this thing alive? The ship I was on in the Navy had enough material on board it to destroy, well, it was 50 times what was used in all of World War II. So how many ships? We have 300 ships in the Navy now. Just think about the annihilation that can occur if we decide to get into a war. Give me a break. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next will be Kevin Camps, followed by Donna Caban, and then Tayaba. Kevin Camps, if you'd like to unmute your microphone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Please state and spell your name. Yes.
That's Kevin, last name Kamps. I serve as a waste specialist at Beyond Nuclear, headquartered in Tacoma Park. I'm speaking to you from Kalamazoo, Michigan. My first comments are about treaties, and as Jay Coughlin said earlier, according to the U.S. Constitution itself, treaties are the supreme law of the land, equal in stature to the Constitution itself. So the first treaty I'd like to discuss is the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The 1970 Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the official policy of the United States government, having some, is to pursue negotiations in good faith for nuclear disarmament. So does expanded plutonium pit production for new nuclear weapons comport with this commitment of the U.S. government? The second treaty of us is the Peace and Friendship Treaty of Root, signed by the U.S. government in 1863 with the Western. My question is, could new designed nuclear weapons with new plutonium pits prompt the United States to resume testing? Of course, this started at the formerly called Nevada test site, now called the National Nuclear Security, because this is on Western Shoshone land. They do not consent to it. It would be a further violation of the Treaty of Ruby Valley to resume nuclear weapons testing there. And as a participant on the Walk Across America in 19, the goal of which was to end nuclear weapons testing on Shoshone land, I am opposed to that. And a preferred alternative to all of this proposal is the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons, the United States. ratify it. I'd also like to address transportation risks. They should be part and parcel of this. As Mayor Leah Kelly testified, there should be full transparency on the necessary transportation of plutonium pits. And I would say that the Department of Energy should already be fully aware of this, given the mobile Chernobyl aspects of the Yucca Mountain, also targeted at Western Shoshone land. And it was a central component of the Department of Energy's NEPA compliance. For that reason, in addition to the 5 locations you've already identified as hosting draft environmental impact statement public meetings, as happened under the Yucca Mountain project, that list of public comment meetings in person and virtual should be expanded significantly to transportation corridor communities. I'll also,
30 seconds, please.
On the transportation risk issue, point to another precedent: oxide fuel lead test assemblies that were transported from Los Alamos to Canada met with lawsuits, specifically here in Missouri. And so the Department of Energy should already know that full treatment of the transportation risks is as a this PEIS. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. There was some breaks in your speaking, so if you would submit your comments in writing too, so we can make sure that they are considered. Thank you. And next will be Donna Caban, followed by Tayaba, and then Joan. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong.
Good evening. Donna Caban, DONNACABANNE. I'm a Livermore resident, an activist, and a member of the Tri-Valley Sierra Club. I am, first of all, going to ask that you increase the scoping comment period. Your aggressive schedule does not allow for adequate comment, and we don't have enough comments, and we don't have enough data to really submit meaningful comments. It needs to be extended. I'd like to say that I am opposed to increasing pit production. It's not necessary to supplement our current stockpile. These new pit production facilities would be for adding to our nuclear weapons program, and that's absolutely not necessary. And in fact, would endanger our population and our environment. Specifically, as far as the Livermore area, you need to address water quality. The Livermore area has already been subjected to very increasing numbers of PFAS, and whether the Environmental Protection Agency or government agencies refuse or are not enacting protections for communities affected very heavily by PFAS, the contamination exists. And this, in addition to additional nuclear waste, potential for mismanagement of nuclear waste, is not acceptable. As far as geology, Livermore sits on or near 6 major faults that do not occur in other sites being considered, and those include the San Andreas faults. These are large. That's a large fault that runs the whole length practically of California. The Hayward fault, the Calaveras fault, and the Hayward fault north and south, the Greenville fault, and some new faults that have been recorded right next to the lab. So again, this is not a suitable site as far as geology. There's also soil contamination that has been documented at the Livermore site in the past and will continue to affect the community. That needs to be examined in detail. You must also look at the air quality of bringing all these trucks in from Los Alamos.
30 seconds, please.
Pardon me?
You have about 30 seconds, please.
Okay. I'll go as fast as I can. Nuclear, the air quality, and also accidents at these facilities, as well as traffic and transportation, as mentioned before. 580 and 80 are very large commute transport systems that have thousands of residents. These would be very, very dangerous routes. We need to know specifically the amounts of trucks, when they're coming, how frequently they're coming. Without that, we can't make adequate comments on your scoping document. Thank you for the opportunity to comment tonight. I will provide more in written comments.
Great, thank you very much. Next will be Tayaba, followed by Joan, and then Marlena Perrott.
Thank you. Are you ready to come in? This is Tayaba.
Yes, go ahead.
This is Tayaba Sadik, Tayyaba, SADIQ, and I urge no more plutonium pits. And I speak as myself, a resident of South Carolina, living near the proposed site of even more plutonium pits, as well as someone who's worked for over a decade with people who've lost their jobs. We need jobs and businesses, but we need the ones that protect their workers and communities and don't exploit them. I'll quote to you from the state newspaper. Sick nuclear workers offered hope with recent decision. After 14 years of inaction, a federal health advisory board has taken steps to help potentially thousands of sick nuclear workers and their families to make medical bills and debts associated with illnesses the employees contracted after working at Savannah Riverside. Local construction workers were among the ailing subcontractors who stand to gain compensation as much as $400,000 to ease the illnesses that they've gotten. In July 2005, when we talk about jobs, July 2005, SRS notifies 400 employees of layoffs. October 2018, multi-billion-dollar mistake. Feds moved to abandon over-budget nuclear fuel plant. 2010, and so on and so forth. And when we talk about the serious health risks from petroleum processing, from the CDC's own radiation emergency sites, because it emits alpha particles, plutonium is most dangerous when inhaled. When inhaled, they lodge in the lung tissue and they can kill lung cells and cause scarring of lungs. This is just the beginning of what can happen to people. And lastly, I want to say that nuclear weapons are not jobs. They're not a deterrent. They don't bring national security. I've participated in Hiroshima Remembers activity for years, and I've listened to survivors like some of the former speakers talked about, including a writer who was not even born when the bomb was dropped. Her mother was a survivor of Hiroshima, and the cancer was so deep it carried into her yet unconceived children. And I've also, for the last year and a half, listened in horror while our own elected officials now threaten to drop nuclear bombs on countries where my own friends live. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Joan, who will be followed by Marlene Perrott and then Becky Halpin. Joan, if you'd like to go ahead and state and spell your name, please.
Yes, thank you for this hearing tonight. My name is Joan Brown, Joan, Brown, Brown, and I'm a Franciscan sister living here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I also work with and am very concerned about the uranium mining legacy, working with MACE, the Multicultural Alliance for Safe Environment, mostly Laguna, Acoma, Navajo people suffering from cancers and that legacy. Also work with a group collaboration of Communities for Clean Water, many folks living just right below Los Alamos National Labs, trying to address the pollution of water and air there. And I also work in the Permian Basin where there is the WIP site, and working with oil and gas, I am very concerned because of the growing seismic activity. The largest last earthquake was maybe a month ago, 5.4, and all of this oil and gas production with this seismic activity is right around WIP. I would call a halt to this whole fiasco. I think we're bent on destroying ourselves. It is immoral. It is unethical. It is not of our spiritual best selves. And we don't need to continue with this. I'm very disheartened continuing to go to these hearings to talk about these plans that feel rather ludicrous, and is not the path that we're called to as human beings. I don't know how many times I can keep saying that. There should be ethical, moral, and spiritual implications in these investigations of whether to go forward and what the plan is, but I don't see any of that. New Mexico continues to be a sacrifice zone for all of this nuclear fuel chain, nuclear energy chain, nuclear weapons chain. Pope Francis in 2019, in addressing the nuclear concern, nuclear proliferation, and actually with the non-proliferation treaty, we should be dismantling and just getting rid of nuclear weapons instead of creating more. But anyway, in 2019, addressing the astronomical amount of money and the concern for humans for this, he said, in a world where millions of children and families live in inhumane conditions, the money that is squandered and the fortunes made through the manufacture, upgrading, maintenance, and sale of ever more destructive weapons are an affront crying out to heaven. So I believe that we need to stop this affront to heaven, to all of those who are living on the planet now, to the future generations, and to the ancestors. I'm sure those that have gone before us from the other side are trying to help us come to our senses, and all of the beings and creatures as well. But somehow we are not listening, we're not hearing. You've heard many technical comments tonight. I could go into a lot of those, but I'm not going to, because we need to approach this from an ethical, moral, and a spiritual perspective. And what is the purpose of us being human beings on this planet? I do not think that we came here to destroy ourselves and life and continue to cause cancers and harm to one another. So thank you for this evening, and I pray that we will pray for greater discernment and soul searching in this issue.
Thank you for your comments. Next is Marlene Perrott, and then Becky Halpin, followed by Joe. Marlene Perrott, if you could unmute your microphone, please. And you will need to click on the microphone icon that's on the toolbar on your screen. Marlene Perrott?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead and state and spell your name.
Marlene, M-A-R-L-E-N-E, Perrott, P-E-R-R-O-T-T-E. Good evening, everyone. I'm Marlene Perrott. I'm a Sister of Mercy and a member of the Communities for Clean Water. Plutonium pit production as deterrent must be interfaced with the moral, ethical, and spiritual purpose or perspective of plutonium pit production, which can lead to the obliteration of the Earth community. We must keep this in mind. Why nuclear weapons? The United States nuclear weapons complex is undergoing a significant transformation. The United States has not manufactured new plutonium pits in significant numbers since 1989, but has thousands of surplus pits in reserve for disassembled weapons. Despite the fact that the United States has thousands of surplus pits in reserve, science shows we can count on the reliability of existing plutonium pits. There are other ways to improve security without the risks and costs of producing new pits. The development of the two locations, Los Alamos and Savannah Riverside, neither of these new facilities is intended to sustain the existing U.S. nuclear arsenal. The production of at least 80 plutonium pits per year by 2030 is unsustainable. The barriers of the program's success are formidable. Since the congressional mandate, Los Alamos has produced just a single pit certified for use in 2024. Meanwhile, facility constraints, workforce issues, and troubling accident history challenge LANL. The lack of vigorous oversight is particularly concerning because all previous efforts to revise pit production have failed at enormous costs.
30 seconds, please.
I would want to say that as a signatory of the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, the United States is obligated to work toward nuclear disarmament, not new nuclear plutonium pit production. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next will be Becky Halpin, followed by Joe, and then Paul Popinchak.
Good evening. My name is Becky Halpin. It's spelled Bekihalpin. Now, I'm very concerned because, as usual, we seem to be rushing forward without any idea of what to do with the waste. NNSA assumes that the waste isolation pit plant, or WIP, will be prioritized for disposal of pit production radioactive waste. In contrast, the New Mexico state permit requires prioritization of the landfill waste, cleanup waste, and DOE, and that DOE start looking for a new out-of-state dump. In addition, WIP is already oversubscribed for all the radioactive waste that the DOE wants to send to it. NNSA needs to fully analyze and project plutonium pit waste disposal for over 100 years. So what we're doing is thinking, well, we're just going to create all this waste and we're going to cram it into a trash can that's already oversubscribed and, by the way, mostly already full and isn't going to fit. And it's all very radioactive, and we're just going to leave it for our children and grandchildren and their children to deal with. This is terrible. It is terrible that we think creating this kind of radioactive weapon will protect us, and in the meantime, we're just poisoning ourselves and our children and grandchildren and those that come after us. We have no idea of what to do with the waste. It's like throwing it over the fence of our children and grandchildren and thinking that, well, everything's going to be okay because it's not in our yard. It's terrible. So this plan needs to consider what's going to happen with all this waste. And, is there going to be a terrorist attack on this waste disposal facility, and what's going to protect it? Are we going to ship it across the country? And how are we going to protect it? And is it going to leak along the way? Of course it is. Legally, it can. Legally, all this waste, all this uranium waste and uranium fuel leaks all the way, every bit of the way, legally. It's very terrible. I'm sad about the whole thing. Deeply sad that we think this is going to protect us when really it's poisoning us. Poisoning the earth that we live on, that we depend on for our lives. So, NNSA needs to fully analyze and project plutonium pit waste disposal for the next 100 years. You can make it 1,000 years, really. And at that, you can't do it. It's something that can't be done. So we need to make no more nuclear pits. We need to stop now. We have plenty. We have more than plenty. And that's all I have to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Joe, followed by Paul Popinchak, and then James Clifford. Joe, if you could unmute your microphone and make your comment. And you'll need to click on the microphone icon. Okay,
Yes.
go ahead.
All right. Yes. I am Joe Hickson, Johickson. I am opposed to the new plutonium pit production. The proposal is not in accord with the U.S. position adopted in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. New pit production is at odds with disarmament of nuclear weapons. I have relatives that are from the South Carolina town of Barnwell, and they know of and have relatives there who are at risk of cancer and that have cancer from their exposure. I have a relative who worked since the 1960s at SRS. He was a classified employee, and his comment regarding new pit production, where we have 14,000 already, we have more than any need now. Why would we add new pit production? This is someone who actually built them. Implementation of the new pit production at Savannah River site will require cooling. That cooling will be, cooled water will be released into the Savannah River, increasing the temperature of the entire river south of the site. In 1970, it increased it 1 degree. With this new production, it would increase it 2 to 4 degrees, and that would negatively impact the weather here with increasing climate change. Warm water in the coastal areas produces more and more damaging hurricanes. I live in Savannah, Georgia, a community directly downstream from the SRS, and would be negatively impacted by this proposal. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you for your comments. Let's see, our next speaker will be Paul Popenchuk, followed by James Clifford, and then Eric Korshner. Paul Popenchuk, are you there? You can unmute your microphone.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Good evening. I would like to offer the following issues.
If you could state and spell your name first, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. That's okay. Thank you.
Paul Popenchuk, P as in Peter, OPINCHALK. I'm a member of the Center for Nonviolent Solutions and Massachusetts PEIS Action, but I'm testifying myself as for myself as a father and a grandfather who despairs for the future that all humanity faces in a world with nuclear weapons. The Nuclear Security Administration should add to their scope of analysis what their re-examine their mission and the whole strategy of attempting to achieve security by depending on nuclear weapons, when in fact the presence of these weapons and our refitting of our triad will in fact promote other nations such as China and North Korea and Iran to fear the United States, causing their obsession with acquiring bigger and more sophisticated nuclear weapons to defend against the American threat to their sovereignty. Also, I recommend that they clearly define under what circumstances the risk of nuclear annihilation of all life on Earth is justified, so that we can understand what in fact this agency is and our government is offering in the way of protection. And also, I recommend that there be a clear analysis of the benefits to be derived from the United States endorsing House Resolution 317 to endorse the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, where the $1 trillion plus upgrade to the triad would create much greater economic benefit by building more housing, reducing carbon emissions, shifting to a clean energy climate, and letting Americans live their hopes and not their fears. President Trump wishes to reinvent government and to get a Nobel Peace Prize. Here is his chance. Eliminate nuclear weapons, serve as a leader for the world. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next will be James Clifford, followed by Eric Kirschner, and then a phone caller from area code 809736. James Clifford, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is James Clifford, JamesClifford. I serve as the City Administrator for the City of North Augusta, South Carolina, a suburb of roughly 27,000 citizens near the Savannah River site. I'm representing the views of the Mayor, Britton Williams. The economic benefit to the citizens of North Augusta and the greater Central Savannah River area is significant. The Savannah River site is a key component to our economy, and we welcome an increased mission at the site. Our comments are in line with those of Angie Cox of the Augusta Metro Chamber of Commerce and Robbie Bennett of the Savannah River Site Community Reuse Organization. The city will be submitting written comments to that effect. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next will be Eric Kirschner, a phone caller from 803 ending in 9736, and then Ann Henry. Eric Kirschner, if you'd like to unmute your microphone. And you'll need to click on the microphone that's in the top right of the screen, or next to your name if you click on the attendee list. Eric Kirschner, you're up next. And okay, we'll move on to phone caller from 803 with the phone number ending in 9736. You can dial *6 to unmute your microphone.
Thank you. My name is Donald Moniak, DONALD MONIAK. I'd like to start by talking about the no action alternative. The gentleman who started it said that there will the only no action alternative, I believe he said, was like 30 to 50 pits. This is not true. No action means no action. The President of the United States 3 months ago said that he would like to see nuclear weapons eliminated. Whether there's a lark or not, we don't know yet. But nonetheless, the situation could change in the next few months, and certainly the situation could change before the draft EIS comes out. So I believe you are obligated to assess a no action alternative where there is actually no action, no pits produced at all. Secondly, I'd like to see an honest evaluation of the options, and I'd like to see an honest evaluation of facts, starting with what a plutonium pit is, because during the presentation it was not very accurate. Leading from that, I'd like to see a very detailed explanation of why the existing pits cannot be used for existing weapons again, and why they cannot be reused for new weapons if you are going to go that path. As far as Savannah River site goes, I'd like to see a socioeconomic analysis that includes an evaluation of the economic stigma on downwind and downriver communities. North Augusta and Aiken, where I am from, are mostly upwind, upriver, and not as affected as areas that are downstream and downriver. Those would be Allendale County, Barnwell County, Bamberg County. These are all poor counties. They do not draw much benefit from Savannah River site. And it has been stated in the past that they have an economic stigma in terms of attracting new industry because of the presence of Savannah River site and the waste that is there, the waste that is buried there, and the risk of a major accident that still exists there. As far as SRS goes too, I'd like to see the plutonium facility that used to be the plutonium MOX facility evaluated in tougher terms in terms of design basis earthquake. When the facility was being built, there was substandard rebar installed, and a DOE attorney during a false claims litigation trial filed a brief that said that they do not know how stable the facility is because of that substandard rebar that was put in. They cannot vouch for the structural stability of the building. That's where I'd like to end. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Let's see, next we'll go back to see if Eric Kirshner, if you're still there, if you'd like to unmute yourself and make your comment, and you'll be followed by Ann Henney and Daniel Alexander.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Please state and spell your name.
Okay, you may lose me. I'm having a real trouble with this format, so I'm not going to see you, probably won't see you again, but I'm going to go to what I have on my computer. Every time I do it, I drop off the meeting.
Okay.
Okay,
yes,
let's see. My name is Erich Kirshner. That's spelled E-R-I-C-H. My last name is spelled K-U-E-R-S-C-H-N-E-R. My affiliation is basically with truth and decency and kindness and critical thinking. My background is I worked on my first EIS in 1972 as an economist for the Skidmore, Owens and Merrill Environmental Study Group while I was teaching economics at the university level. I've worked, forgot about that. I gave similar comments on the modernization hearings, I believe, way back when, 2018. What I learned in working on the environmental impact statement for Skidmore, Owens and Merrill was that if the methodology is sound, it's a wonderful process for reaching the truth and as an economist to better use of resources. Now, we also learned and talked about it a lot and worried about it, that an EIS can also be used to justify bad behavior. And what one does is one manipulates the needs and purpose of an EIS in such a way that only the desired outcome that they want is permitted. I mean, it can be maybe a slight baby blue rather than a teal blue, but it's basically that's how one does bad EISs. And if it's used and basically that's sadly what I see is happening here. We're using the EIS, environmental really impact statement process to justify a corporate giveaway. Precisely the bad practice in EIS was designed to eliminate. I mean, the definition is so narrow that even if we could find usable pits meeting the military objectives that are available without work, without contamination, it would not be permitted because we're hiding under a mandate that I feel and many of us feel is illegal. It violates earlier laws and non-proliferation treatments, and the whole purpose of that basically is to enrich, as far as I'm concerned as an economist, is to divert resources, as Dwight D. Eisenhower said, from the poor to the rich. Am I still on there?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
You have about 30 seconds left.
Okay, basically, I think scoping is a place for citizens' input, and we've got to revisit purpose and need. Claiming that the need and purpose of a PEIS is set in stone and can't be changed, I claim is false. In law, it is often stated by attorneys as saying asserting a cow is a horse, absent supporting evidence does not make it so. That's what's happening here. We're hiding security needs under legal needs, and that's precisely what an EIS was designed to prevent. You know, how can doubling down on a legacy of lies, and let's not forget the entire, as Stuart Udall said, the entire history of the atomic bomb is one of lies. I mean, it was developed underhanded, never should have been, never was needed.
If you could wrap up your comments, please.
Okay, I will. I mean, I'm just saying it's really really sad that we're doubling down. It's no longer an issue of rationality or mad. It's insanity, and I just say we need to revisit. And I'll write in specific comments while I suggest how we word and revisit and reconcile.
We'll look forward to your written comments.
Okay, I'm gonna stop here.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Ann Henney will be our next speaker, followed by Daniel Alexander, and then Michael Freed. Ann Henney, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm Ann Henney, ANNEHENNY. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, home of Lawrence Livermore Labs. I'm a member of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, the world's oldest women's peace organization. I'm very concerned that the proposed plutonium pit production program could generate a renewed global nuclear arms race, adding to the existential threat we all face from the world's existing nuclear stockpile. The Programmatic EIS should thoroughly analyze a full range of alternatives, including a genuine no-action alternative consistent with the disarmament commitments that our country made in the 1970 Non-Proliferation Treaty. The PEIS also must fully evaluate the environmental impacts and risks to communities of transporting nuclear materials all across the country. It must evaluate and disclose how the pit production waste can be safely stored in perpetuity. As we have heard, the waste isolation pilot plant in New Mexico is not viable. And the Programmatic EIS needs to fully evaluate the short and long-term, the program's short and long-term effects on worker safety, climate change, and environmental justice communities. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next will be Daniel Alexander, followed by Michael Freed and Jan Boudard.
Good evening. My name is Daniel Alexander, DANIELALEXANDER. I'm a councilman from Barnwell County. I've heard Barnwell mentioned a few times tonight from people who don't live here, so I'm happy to bring a perspective from someone who actually does live here. For those of you that do not know, Barnwell County borders the Savannah River site, and let's not forget 2/3 of that land was sacrificed by families from Barnwell generations ago. The site isn't just near to us, it came from us. That's how personal it is. I'm here tonight to make sure our voice, our history, our workforce, and our future is not overlooked in a conversation that directly affects all three. Some of you see this as a debate about war. I understand that perspective, but let's be honest, this isn't about launching missiles. It's about preventing conflict. It's about keeping our deterrent strong. For more than 70 years, the Savannah River site has delivered safely, professionally, and with a workforce that understands what it means to handle critical national missions. Families in our region built and ran this facility. They didn't read about nuclear protocols. They lived them. Now, I understand some of you express concerns about nuclear safety, and that's fair. This kind of work definitely demands scrutiny. But let's also be clear. SRS is one of the most rigorously regulated and carefully monitored nuclear sites in the country. It has operated around the clock for decades with a workforce, a world-class safety culture, and its record speaks for itself. The workers on site are trained, experienced, and committed to doing the job the right way. And for me, this is also personal. When you look at a local district map, my district, District 4, includes that 2/3 of Savannah River site. It may no longer officially be a part of Barnwell County, but it's still there, it's still visible, and it's still tied to our identity. That's how deep this connection really runs. That's how much we've invested and continue to invest in getting this right. While the Savannah River Plutonium Processing Facility employees from our area will build on that legacy, not just start from scratch. This project will create thousands of construction jobs and more than 2,000 permanent positions. It will drive our local investment and support regional growth, all while meeting the highest environmental and safety standards. Let's also be honest with ourselves. This decision to increase and modernize the nuclear stockpile has already been made. The only real question now is where the work gets done and who can do it the right way. Barnwell and the SRS region are ready. We have the infrastructure, we have the expertise, and we have the people who know how to do this safely, efficiently, and responsibly. Now, I know some folks come here into these hearings, they act like they're the only ones that understand the stakes. But let me be clear. I understand exactly what's at stake. And unlike many critics here on this call, our people also understand what's at stake and, more importantly, what it takes to get the job done safely, responsibly, and efficiently. SRS has the infrastructure, it has the institutional memory, it has the people. This is the place, these are the people. So while I respect the questions raised here tonight, I'm here to offer some of my own. Who's going to do this work with the skill and care it demands? Who's ready to deliver for this country and for their neighbors? We are. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker will be Michael Freed, followed by Jan Bodart, and then Ace Hoffman. Michael Freed, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. This is Michael Freed. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Michael, M-A-C-H-A-E-L, Freed, F-R-E-E-D. Resident of Cherryland, which is unincorporated Alameda County, one of the larger counties in the state. And I'm in unincorporated, which means that I don't really have a say as far as our governance goes, aside from our county supervisors. And I know that our county supervisors extend out to Livermore, and I hope that they are listening in on this program, because I would like to have them go in support of the Livermore facilities, basically standing down and starting to work towards the real goal is non-proliferation and reduction of anything nuclear, and working more towards the affectation of peace rather than potential and other life form existence. I do appreciate the last caller's comments about being willing and able to take on the responsibility for handling everything safely. And I would like to propose to them that they go ahead and take over whatever facility improvements, and we'll put that in quotation marks, would be forwarded by from the Livermore lab facility, and let them go ahead and take it on, and we'll go ahead and clean up our area in preparation for what might be a devastating turn of events in the near future. I'd also like to recommend all people on this call and anybody else to go back to the book Hiroshima by John Hersey and reread that if you haven't read it, or if you've never heard about it, read it. And I think that would be enough incentive to move away from this disastrous project that we're moving so courageously forward with. One other comment I wanted to make was that during the Manhattan Project, my mother was an expediter for DuPont during that period, and the folks that worked there had no idea what they were doing. It was a very secretive project, and I read a book called The Manhattan Project just recently, and yeah, it was basically just on a bunch of lies. The people that were putting that thing together, the whole project was based on finding only successes. They didn't want to hear any mistakes, any problems that might occur. All they wanted to hear about were successes, and they were eventually successful in creating this monster that we are now living with. And that was a tiny monster compared to what's really proposed in the future. There won't be any future for us to worry about, or any place for anybody to be pointing fingers about who, you know, was on the right side. So I think we should just better be on the right side, and that might preserve our time in the future. Anyway, thank you so much for these, and I would also like to encourage more of these, you know, commentaries, and if we can get a few more of them in place so more people can come forward and voice their opinions and their concerns. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you for your
Appreciate all the
comments.
time.
Our next speaker will be Jan Bodart, followed by Ace Hoffman, and then Lori Johnston. We have a few more speakers after those three, and Stephen Young will be our final speaker for the evening. So Jan Bodart, please go ahead.
Hi, I was here yesterday. My name is Jan Budar, Janboudart, and I wanted to talk about the Navajo. Why did they have the highest demographic of people who died from COVID? Did we get rid of the interference? There's interference.
Yep, I'll try to find and mute that line.
The DNA must have had depressed immune systems. How did they get depressed immune systems? Many had already died, and because they worked in mines with no hazmat, they drank the water that came into the mine. They showered in the water and then came home and associated with their children. So they had very depressed immune systems. And so when COVID hit, their bodies were not prepared. And we had a friend, Clee Benali, who I was going to become acquainted with because of a project that I do. And he died before I could get a chance to talk to him. And he was in his 50s as a Navajo. The constant grief and anger that the DNA have experienced because of the mining and COVID is extremely debilitating, and it's tragic. I also wanted to talk about Chris Busby's article in Counterpunch about the nuclear Navy. He found when the Navy defended the USS Reagan complaints that they said that people on the USS Reagan didn't have any worse health problems than the rest of the Navy, and they gave out the statistics for the rest of the Navy. Chris Busby looked at this, and he found that people who had worked in the nuclear Navy had cancer 9 times the rate of the general population. I think I would like to recommend Justin Noble's book, Plutonium. I've got that wrong. Petroleum 238. It's a take on Plutonium 238. It's a book about the dangers of oil and gas use. And then I have another subject, and that is tax breaks and bonuses. TMI was started right at the end of the year so that the company that built it could get their tax break by finishing on time. And TMI 1 or 2, I can never remember which, lasted
30
3
seconds,
months.
please.
TMI lasted 3 months. They got their tax break. I don't know whether they had to give it back, but it was a matter of deadlines. The same thing in Chernobyl. There was a deadline. Everybody got their bonuses. And if you look at the statistics, you'll see Chernobyl started right at the end of the year because they got a bonus for being on time, but they didn't get finished with the power plant, and it collapsed in less than 4 years. And then I would like to also talk about...
You could wrap up your comments, please.
Yeah. June 26th at 7 p.m. Central Time, Jason Sally will be talking about what it's like to work, live, and write in a sacrifice zone in central and southern Ohio. I am done. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker will be Ace Hoffman, followed by Lori Johnston, and then Emily.
First,
go ahead.
Yes, thank you. First, I'd like to thank you for holding these hearings electronically. Otherwise, there'd be no chance I could speak, as I've had cancer twice, and I'm told I'm very immune compromised. I was mentored by 3 Manhattan Project scientists, John Goffman, Carl Z. Morgan, and Marion Falk. And I wrote a animation program for timing very carefully the screen, the mouse, the joystick, and so forth. And it turned out EG and G was one of my customers for a long time. And then the United States government, through a contractor, bought my source code. My point is that I've been working on these issues for a long, long time. I'm not sure what happened to that software, but we talk about the triggers for the plutonium. The plutonium has to have a trigger as well. It's conventional explosives. And those have to have a trigger, which is electronic. And that's probably the part that I help them with. If you add, my name, I didn't tell you my name, I didn't spell it. A-C-E is the first name, and Hoffman, H-O-F like in Frank, F like in Frank, M-A-N. And if you add .blogspot to that, .com, you'll find what I'm going to submit in writing to you. I'm totally opposed to plutonium pit production. I don't think we need anywhere near the number of nuclear weapons that we have. I'm willing to concede, however, that we might need a few as a deterrence. However, I don't believe that MAD is a reasonable possibility. Instead, my number has always been 7. I don't know why I picked 7. I discussed it with John Goffman many, many, many years ago. He agreed that we need more than 1 for more than 0 for deterrence, and he could not come up with a specific number either. At any rate, we've got more than enough with nothing to do with it. We have no way, nothing, we don't know of a way to handle the waste. And we don't know how to stop terrorism. We don't know how to stop airplanes falling out of the sky. We don't know how to stop AI from convincing some junior officer that the president has told him to push a button when in fact it's only AI that's doing the job. These are just some of the problems. I realize I've probably talked close to 3 minutes, so I'm going to stop, but I do recommend people please go to my to the Blogspot and take a read of my comments. Thank you very much, and thank you for holding these hearings.
Thank you for your comments. Lori Johnston will be next, followed by Emily, and then Joni Ahrens.
Laura Johnston for Southeast Indigenous Peoples Center. Thank y'all for organizing this dialogue. As it sounds like we won't get answers to our questions, we just want y'all to understand that Indigenous peoples' governments remain the lawmakers for our territories. It would be good if the newcomer U.S. turned away from its rascal ways and adhered to the laws of the land. The U.S. could develop a system of laws, rules, and norms that are consistent with international law, which would be administered by accountable institutions through participatory frameworks for U.S. folks. To act as a lawful government, the U.S. would negotiate with the government of each indigenous people who is affected by U.S. activities in order to obtain the free, prior, and informed consent to access, use, or affect indigenous peoples' territories or resources. The U.S. could achieve its own aspirational constitution by forming a government that could negotiate and maintain in good faith agreements with indigenous peoples' governments to access, use, or affect their territories and resources. Healthy ecosystems are essential to realizing the human right to life. The U.S. should manifest its promise to implement the United Nations Charter and the American Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which clarifies for confused states that indigenous peoples are, in fact, human peoples with equal rights to self-determination. In accordance with international law, indigenous peoples and our governments are not liable for and are held harmless for U.S. operations, including those related to nuclear sites and routes for the U.S. military and global nuclear industrial complex. Indigenous peoples' rights to full restoration from nuclear harm remains undiminished.
Do you have anything else to add? All right, thank you for your comment. Emily's next. Okay, thanks. Followed by Joni Ahrens, and then our final speaker will be Stephen Young. Emily?
Emily Havener, E-M-I-L-Y-H-A-V-E-N-E-R, from Somerville, South Carolina. I actually lived in Barnwell in high school and in proximity to the Savannah River site. There have been a number of studies and reports done over decades of time that revealed contamination of tritium in air and then rainfall, as well as in the Savannah River itself. So the idea that this is a completely safe facility is really not borne out by that data, first of all. And second of all, there are the position of the United States is nuclear disarmament. And this expanded plutonium pit production does not comply with that. I think it's pretty clear that the current administration is not trying to pursue peace, but is actually alienating allies and calling into question whether or not we are going to comply with countries that have previously been on the opposite side of our ideals for peace around the world. In addition, the administration is suppressing environmental justice and climate change issues, which are part of this conversation. I plan to contact my state and federal legislators and ask them to not support this as a resident of South Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Joni Ahrens, you're next, and then Stephen Young. And Joni Ahrens, okay, go ahead.
Yes, good evening. Joni Ahrens, JoniArends. And I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico. My comments tonight are, I'm going to read from the new Union of Concerned Scientists report on plutonium pit production, the risks and costs of U.S. plans to build new nuclear weapons. The highlights of this report are the United States is planning a $1.7 trillion overhaul of its entire nuclear arsenal, designing new warheads and investing in new bombers, missiles, and submarines to carry them. The new warheads, in turn, are driving demand for new plutonium pits, the bomb cores that begin the chain reaction in every U.S. thermonuclear weapon, despite the fact that the United States has thousands of surplus pits in reserve. Producing new pits would not only be expensive, time-consuming, and logistically challenging, but it is also technically unnecessary and politically destabilizing. Increase national security by encouraging a new arms race. In addition, a rushed program will likely increase health risks to workers and communities. Science shows we can count on the reliability of existing plutonium pits. There are other ways to improve security without the risks and costs of producing new pits. And that's written by Dylan K. Spalding in May 2025. The entire report has been released on the Union of Concerned Scientists website. I think it's really important to acknowledge how much pressure has been placed on the public since January 10th, when the LANL site-wide environmental impact statement in draft form was released for public comment. In the meantime, we've been threatened with the release of 30,000 curies of tritium. And then we get the PEIS. There was something else in between. Oh,
about 30 seconds.
Okay, learning more about how NNSA is shipping newly generated waste to WIPP, taking up space that is supposed to be for legacy waste, pre-1999 waste. And finally, New Mexico is just, there's no words to describe the harm that DOE has inflicted on New Mexico, continues to abuse New Mexico. Just even the example of shipping newly generated waste rather than legacy waste to get the waste off the hill. That's been the task for since 1999, and they
Could wrap up your
fail.
comments, please?
Yes, they failed miserably. And while I appreciate this electronic format for these comments, I also would have appreciated that we could be in the same room together and be a community. This is very segmented process, but I thank you for your, I thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And then our final speaker of the evening is Stephen Young. We've reached a little bit past the end time that was published. So Stephen Young, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Young, Stephen Young, Young. I am the Associate Director for Government Affairs in the Global Security Program for the Union of Concerned Scientists. And want to make just a few comments, several of which you've heard before, but the first and most important is that the scoping of this hearing should absolutely include a true no action alternative that would not make any new pits. If you're not doing that as an option, then you're not doing a true EIS as required by law. It needs to have an actual no action alternative as opposed to what you all think of as limited, but is in fact making new plutonium pits. Second, as part of this analysis, you also should do a thorough evaluation of the pits you already have in stock to see which of those might be reusable. As the previous director of NNSA stated in public, you plan to reuse some pits for the W93 warhead. I would like a clear exploration of if you could indeed reuse all pits for the W93 warhead if it is even needed. I would argue it is not. You also should explore the option of if there is a problem with the pit, whether or not the problem is associated with the plutonium in the pit or with the other pit components. In other words, you may be able to reuse the plutonium piece of the pit while recasting and reworking other elements of the pit that are non-plutonium to create a reusable pit that otherwise might not be usable, and still saving billions of dollars while being less detrimental to the environment and the public. Finally, I would strongly encourage the NNSA and the labs to cooperate fully with the JASON, Independent Science Advisory Body. It is, I believe, this summer doing a new study on plutonium pit lifetime. As you know, in 2006, they did a full study that found plutonium pit lifetimes were on average good for 100 years or more. The 2019 follow-up letter report was very brief, but did not update the data for reasons that are unclear. And the JASON at that time called for more detailed study. I hope that the 2025 study they're now undertaking will be a detailed study with full cooperation from the labs and NNSA to ensure JASON can have a full detailed assessment of plutonium pit lifetime. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. And as I mentioned, Stephen Young was our final commenter for the evening. We had scheduled that we'd be here until 7:30 Eastern or Mountain Time and 9:30 Eastern Time. So I would like to thank everyone for your participation and comments. You do have the opportunity to continue to submit comments on the scope of the PEIS until the comment period closes on July 14th. You can do that by email at PEIS@nnsa.doe.gov. That is the preferred method. And you can also send them in by postal mail to Jade Fortner, it's PIT, PEIS comments, NNSA, Office of Pit Production Modernization, 1000 Independence Avenue, Southwest, Washington, D.C., 20585. All comments are considered equally regardless of whether they're spoken in the meeting tonight or sent in by email or postal mail. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for their time and attention this evening and for participating in this process. And we will look forward to your written comments. Thank you very much and have a good evening.